Okay, so we've got this situation brewing, right? With the New Jersey governor, Phil Murphy, and some comments he made about immigration. And man, it's really touched a nerve with some folks.
Yeah, no doubt. What might have seemed like an offhand remark has kind of blown up, bringing in like questions about immigration law and how we think about sanctuary cities and even uh, the whole debate about crime and immigration. It's a lot to unpack, right? Like one little comment and boom, we're down this rabbit hole.
Totally. So
Uh-huh.
Governor Murphy, right, he's giving this talk, and he mentions a friend who's, quote, struggling with their immigration status. And right off the bat, this is important. Our source really emphasizes this point. Struggling with their status doesn't automatically mean someone's, undocumented or whatever.
Right, right, exactly. It's way more complicated than that, right? Like immigration law is a beast, and people can have issues with their status even if they're here totally legally. Maybe their visa is about to run out or they're trying to get a green card, which can be a total nightmare.
Right. Exactly. So anyway, Murphy then adds this kind of like jokey comment about how he told his friend they could stay in like the room above his garage. And then he throws in this good luck to the feds coming in to try to get her. His office later said this was, meant to show support, maybe a little playful dig at the feds. But this is where things really went sideways.
Yeah, you could say that. That one remark, even if you meant it in good fun, it set off some alarm bells with people who are, really focused on immigration enforcement. And that's where Tom Homan comes in. He's the former ICE director, and let me tell you, he was not messing around.
Not mess around is putting it mildly. He goes on Sean Hannity's show and basically threatens Governor Murphy with, like, jail time. And
Yeah.
he's not just, like, throwing out accusations. He cites an actual law.
Title 8 of the United States Code, Section 1324 to be precise. And just so you know, that section deals with harboring or concealing undocumented immigrants. So Homan's saying that if Governor Murphy knowingly did that, he could be prosecuted. And, our source actually pointed out that Homan's grammar kind of went off the rails there, but the point he was making is what really matters.
Yeah, the source mentioned something about this man's grammar, which, okay, a little funny, but yeah, you're right. It's the substance that counts. But this whole thing about Title 8, it does make you wonder, right? Even if we take Murphy's comment as suggesting he'd hide someone undocumented, does that even legally qualify as harboring or concealing? Like, usually you need more than just a casual comment, right? It's about actually actively trying to hide someone from ICE.
Exactly. And that's the super important nuance here. Like, just saying something, even if it's dumb, is way different from, like, actually hiding someone so ICE can't find them. But Homan didn't just stop there. He went on to attack sanctuary cities, calling them, quote, a sanctuary for criminals. He even brings up this terrible case, the killing of Lake and Riley in Georgia. Our source says it happened in New York City, but that's not right. But anyway, Holman uses this case to argue that sanctuary policies are responsible for, deaths of thousands. That's a huge and really loaded claim.
Totally. And to really get this debate, it's important to understand what a sanctuary city even is. Our source lays it out pretty clearly. It's basically a place where the local cops don't really help IC with deportations. It's crucial to remember that this doesn't mean these cities are like lawless zones, right? Which is how some people try to paint them. The idea behind these policies, our source explains, is often that local police, they have limited resources and need to focus on, local crime. And dealing with immigration is, that's the Fed's job.
Think of it this way. Local police often depend on help from immigrant communities, to solve crimes. If those communities are afraid that talking to the police might get them deported, well, they're less likely to, come forward as witnesses or report crimes. Sanctuary policies, they're about trying to build trust so everyone feels safer, not about protecting criminals. But as you mentioned, Homan seemed to link those policies directly to violent crime, using that Lake and Riley case as his, Exhibit A. And he also said he thought the Trump administration would put an end to sanctuary cities, maybe even through the Supreme Court.
And here's where it's so important to separate the talk from the reality. That Lake and Riley case, it's incredibly sad, but to say it happened because of sanctuary policies,
Right.
that's a big jump. And honestly, it may be kind of misleading, right? Like, it takes one awful event and tries to apply it to like whole cities. And also whether a president can just end sanctuary cities, that's a whole legal debate in itself.
Totally agree. Then Hannity throws in this GAO study from way back in 2011 that claimed there were 3 million criminal offenses committed by illegal immigrants. Our source was super skeptical about that number, especially because it's like ancient history at this point. Just think about how much has changed since 2011, right? The laws, how they enforce them, even how they keep track of crime. That number is way too old and too vague to really mean much today.
And Hannity didn't stop there. He starts asking all these questions with no real evidence about how many crimes are committed by undocumented immigrants today, about, quote, missing children used by illegal immigrants, about American victims of violent crime. It felt like he was trying to, create this image of, like, total chaos and danger, but without any facts to back it up.
Right, exactly. It was all these, like, emotionally charged what ifs, probably to make people scared rather than, have a real conversation. And here's the kicker, the really interesting part. When Hannity pushes for, like, actual numbers, hard evidence, Homan's response is, well, pretty revealing.
Oh, yeah, I remember this. He says there's, quote, really no metric on that because, quote, many sanctuary cities don't even track their nationality when they come into jail. But our source is like, whoa, hold up, and calls that claim straight up factually inaccurate, and for good reason.
Because, when they book someone into jail, they usually record their nationality, their ethnicity, even their religion. It's standard procedure. So this idea that sanctuary cities just don't collect this basic information, that's just plain wrong.
The source even goes so far as to say the numbers being thrown around seem to be literally made up. That's a pretty serious accusation.
It is. And it shows how sometimes people use, anecdotes and claims with no proof to try and scare people and influence policy, especially on hot-button issues like immigration. And here's something super important that often gets lost in all the noise. Our source points out that overall, immigrants in the U.S. are actually less likely to commit crimes than people born here. That's a really important fact to remember when you hear these kinds of arguments.
For sure. And the source we're looking at, which is a transcript from that YouTube channel, The Ring of Fire, they also talk about the politics behind all this rhetoric. They point out that there's all this focus on individual crimes by undocumented immigrants, like that Lake and Riley case, but less attention on other types of violence that might actually harm more people.
And that difference in focus raises a big question. Why are some crimes, put under a microscope while others are barely mentioned? The source suggests that these arguments, they're being used to try and justify some pretty harsh actions when it comes to immigration policy.
And just so you know, the Ring of Fire, they're generally seen as, on the left politically. They were founded by Mike Papantonio and have over 1 million subscribers on YouTube, so their views definitely matter to their audience. It's good to know where a source is coming from, to understand their take on things.
Absolutely. Knowing a source's perspective helps you, spot any potential bias and see the information within a bigger context. In this case, the Ring of Fire is clearly pretty skeptical of all this talk about immigration, pointing out the potential for misinformation and how certain narratives get pushed.
So to sum it all up, we've got this, maybe not so smart comment from a governor, then a former ICE director throws out some serious legal threats, citing a specific law, and then we're thrown into this whole mess about sanctuary cities, what they are versus what people say they are. And all of this is wrapped up in this debate about crime statistics that are, well, pretty questionable.
What's really fascinating is how all these different pieces fit together. Like this one offhand comment becomes this huge flashpoint, exposing all these deep divisions and the often shaky information that gets spread about immigration, the actual legal grounds for those threats, what sanctuary cities really do, how reliable the crime data is. It all becomes part of this big fight.
So what's the takeaway for you, the listener? I think it shows how crucial it is to be super careful about the information you're getting, especially with issues like immigration. They're so emotional and political, right? It shows how easy it is for people to create stories and how important it is to, dig a little deeper, look at the evidence with a critical eye, and try to figure out why people are saying what they're saying.
And that brings us to a final thought. Considering all the problems we've seen with the information being thrown around, like how people define sanctuary cities and the accuracy of the crime stats, what's really behind all this heated rhetoric on immigration? What are the forces driving it? And maybe even more important, how can we all develop those critical thinking skills so we can, navigate these competing stories and come to a more informed and balanced understanding of this issue? Because it's complex, and it's not going away anytime soon.
That's a great question to leave you with. We encourage you to, do some research on your own. Look into Title 8, Section 1324, see how sanctuary cities work in different places, what the real-world effects are. Because when we're informed, then we can have those more meaningful conversations about immigration, conversations based on facts.